What's your opinion on this? Do you think it's possible to be highly abundant and wealthy as an artist or a creator? Now, obviously, this question is going to be very individual in your response, which I think if you're questioning if it's possible, and even if you're not, you're really going to enjoy this episode today. My guest today on the show is Michelle I. Gomez. She is a coach for creatives and artists and multi-passionate creators who are trying to navigate, the robust world of mental health to create mental wealth. I had a really fascinating conversation with her that I definitely think you're going to enjoy. So before I dive in, let me introduce myself. I'm Tracy Matthews. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer over at Flourish and Thrive Academy and the author of the Desire Brand Effect book and the host of the Thrive by Design podcast. I help jewelry designers and other makers, artists, and creators make multiple 6 figures to 7 figures in their businesses using my methodology called the Desire Brand Effect. My book just came out in November, and I'm really excited to be honored if you pick it up. You can find it over on Amazon.com or on the desirebrandeffect.com website. And with that, I just want to tell you that if you aren't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, you hit the notification bell, and that after you watch this video, if you've enjoyed it, make sure that you like it and comment on, tell us your biggest takeaway. So I'm just really excited. This conversation was fascinating, and I know you're probably going to want to get pen and paper as you're listening to this while you're working at your bench or driving or whatever, however you listen to podcasts and videos, and check it out because there's some really great takeaways that Michelle has to share. So let's dive in. All right, so I'm really excited to have another guest who specializes in mental health for creatives on the show today. Welcome, Michelle Gomez.
Hello, Tracy Matthews. Thank you for having me. I'm so honored.
We should just call each other by our first and last names the entire time.
It sounds so amazing, Tracy Matthews.
That's so funny. Anyway, as someone who's been mentoring artists and designers and makers, in particular in the jewelry and handmade industry for a very long time, we both probably know and have experienced that sometimes with creativity, not always, that there is a roller coaster of emotions and sometimes mental health issues that come along with being in a space where you're innately creative. And I want to kind of dive into this in a sensitive way today so that we can kind of talk and give some actionable support to people who might be struggling with confidence or anywhere from like confidence as a creative all the way to like more severe, I don't know, I hate to put it this way, but diagnosable conditions and how we can actually deal with that and use it to fuel our creativity instead of drain it. Does that sound good?
That sounds amazing. I'm all for, putting a positive spotlight on this and seeing our mental health struggles as fuel to power our creativity, as you say.
It's going to be awesome. Okay, so Michelle was introduced to me because we were looking for some people. We had some people actually request this in our community, like, how do you deal? And so I'm really excited to have you. But before we kind of dive into stuff, because we started diving into this in the pre-show part, but I just want to just tell us about a little bit about your journey. How'd you get involved in supporting creatives with mental health and all the things?
Oh my gosh. So supporting them in their mental health was always there, but I didn't know that was called mental health. So Tracy, do you mind if we do a coaching drill right now?
Yeah, let's
before
do it.
I answer that question. So I want to look up the definition of mental health. If I cannot remember it off the top of my head. Let's start with that, and then I'll tell you my journey. Okay.
That sounds great.
So I'm reading it from, oh, you just cut off there. Okay, got you back. All right. So I'm going to read this from Wikipedia, which is sourced from the World Health Organization. Okay, so this is a legit resource. All right, so here it goes. Mental health, defined by the World Health Organization, is, quote, a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community.
Yeah.
So are we on the same page now about mental
Yes.
health?
Yes.
Awesome. I just love to define words because a lot of times we use language and we don't understand what we're really saying. So I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page and that all of your listeners are on the same page with us so we can go through this journey. So I said that I was coaching on mental health for a long time and I didn't realize it until I looked up this definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started coaching. My career as a coach started with solely coaching like women identifying artists. Like when I say artists, the traditional kind of
Yeah.
artists that you think of, right? Someone like at the studio, painting, drawing, making jewelry. And I was basically helping them with their state of well being so that they can realize their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and able to make a contribution to their community through their business. Now, I didn't know I was doing this. I was just natural at it. Have you ever found yourself just being in a zone of genius without knowing that that was your zone of genius?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. And we approach it over here a little bit differently because we call it more about mindset work, but it's all the same thing. It's like, how do you overcome what it is that is holding you back to be more productive or to share your gifts or to do all the things without letting those stories or whatever it is that's holding you back, like run your life. Right. And so for me, like, I feel like my zone of genius is like helping people get back into their creativity when they're feeling stuck or lost their mojo.
Hell yeah, that's your zone of genius because believe it or not, you probably hit rock bottom and lost your creativity and you had to find it.
100%.
Mhm.
And more than once.
And it's not that we don't ever get out of that cycle. It's that we go through the ups and downs and we learn how to better regulate with the ups and downs and better regulate our relationship to money and creativity, right? Because we are not money, we are not creativity, we are soul, we are source, we are spirit. And we just need to reconnect, right? By regulating our emotions, by remembering who the F we are. Do you mind if I curse on this podcast?
No, go for it.
To remember who the fuck we are. So I was helping people to remember who the fuck they were before they started losing money, before they were told before the age of 7 that they would never make it, right? Before they were conceived in the womb and somehow an embryo stage felt like they weren't worthy, right? So I would do like regressions. I would do like really deep stuff with my clients. How did I get into this? Well, I started my first arts event planning company called Creative Unions Event Design in 2017. After I hit rock bottom, I had less than $10 in my bank account, moved from Baltimore, Maryland, where I went to school and lived and worked for 8 years, back home to Miami, Florida, to my mother's house, who it was not the best situation, right? For my mental health, living with a narcissistic, emotionally abusive parent. So I had less than $10 in my bank account, was drunk and high, Tracy, like at the same time, like drunk and high on the beach. Like if you're listening to this podcast by yourself in the bathroom or whatever, I want you to raise your hand if you've been there. Even if you're alone, right? Like raise your hand if you've been there, right? Like rock bottom, not knowing what the fuck to do.
Definitely rock bottom.
And
yes.
oh my God, like so many times. And I had 6 figures in debt from art school and I had no job and less than $10. So I was at the beach and I asked God, I asked Yamaya, I asked the spirit guides, I asked the spirits of the ocean to help me. I said, what can I do to get paid to do what I love? And I had 12 plus years of experience, all kinds of experiences in the art world. And I was still unhappy, even with 2 degrees from the best art school in the country, right? So this voice came to me, probably the weed and alcohol speaking, said, why not see weddings as art exhibitions? Then I started to Google business plans that same day. I got home, sobered up, started getting free business planning templates, free coaching from business coaches that were not artist coaches online, attending webinars, just getting as much free information as I could. And I'm like, wow, this is so much more valuable than art school education. And this is free.
Mhm.
So I built my first business, sold my first $10,000 art exhibition that I curated for a wedding. And lo and behold, artists are like, how did you do that? What's an LLC? How do you get paid? What's a
Yeah.
business plan? And then I just said, and then this voice came to me one day as I was running the event planning company, said, coach, you need to coach, but you need to coach artists that are not just artists.
Mhm.
Okay. And I was like, who is that? Like, what does that mean? Like, if you're an artist that's not just an artist. Basically, I was coaching multi-passionate creators. I like to call them creators, but I didn't figure out that they were creators until this year, 3 years into my coaching business. So I actually identify more as a creator. Why? Because that's, to me, in my opinion, that's more powerful, because I'm not just limited to canvas, paper, jewelry, things that I make with my hands. I create my business, I create my relationships, I
Mhm.
create my job, I create the money in my bank account, I create everything, everything. And
Mhm.
that's just like more powerful for me. So for the past 3 years, I've been coaching creators to to get paid to do what they love without sacrificing their mental health in the process. They've built multi six-figure businesses on their way to seven figures. Um, and I became one of like the fastest growing coaches in the country at some point, like making like $30,000 cash a month, and then one day, Tracy, like I hit rock bottom again. Like you'd think like, wow, she's like making $30,000. She like, like Drake started from the bottom, now she's here, right? No, I lost it all. I lost my mind. And then I sought out a psychiatrist and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder too.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about mental health.
Yeah, let's do it. You got some experience, and I can feel you on a lot of those things. I have a mother. She passed away a long time ago, but we think that she was probably bipolar. I was in a marriage with someone who was bipolar, and I understand mental illness on a personal level through my experiences and stuff like that. And obviously, I also work with creatives and creators. I love that
Good.
definition. And I love the definition of you calling it people at creators, because we can co-create whatever it is that we want if we just believe and take the actions to get there, right? And so anything's by design. And I feel you on that. It's like the cycle of and my belief is this: when we get distracted from our flow, or misaligned with our creative gifts, or out of touch with our co-creative abilities, that's when we start hitting rock bottom. It's like we get sidetracked somehow, maybe but because we're too focused on the tangible things like the money instead of the impact, or we're too focused on doing what we don't want to do instead of leaning into what we want to do, right? And so we get sidetracked, and it becomes a thing. So let's do this. So my first question for you is, besides like, tell us your background, is like, why do you think that there's a correlation? Why is there like this stereotype of the correlation between creatives, creators, artists, and all that stuff in mental illness or mental health?
Yes. So I just want to preface with the fact that I am not a licensed therapist. I am not a trained professional in mental health. I just happen to have a lot of people who trust me with their money, their souls, and their hearts
Mm.
to coach them without this kind of licensed training on their mental health. Because I am a life and business coach. I'm not a therapist. So I can answer that question based off my case studies and my research. So I've coached hundreds of artists, and well, now I have to stick with the word that I use now, creators.
Fine.
The correlation I find between creatives, and mental illness is that, simply put, they were not supported in their zone of genius and in their ability to create or be an artist at a young age. And that is what I consider complex childhood trauma. Complex childhood trauma and trauma in general, acute trauma, complex trauma, is the root of all mental illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we're not taught how to regulate our emotions, we are put under prescription drugs to do the work for us. Mind you, a lot of us are on prescriptions for things that we don't have. We're given prescriptions for epilepsy, schizophrenia, um, depression and anxiety. And this might be very controversial, Tracy, but I don't believe that we are those things. What I really believe is happening at the core root is this a dysregulated nervous system is occurring. There's not a balance between the left and right sides of the brain. This is why they say that that artists are like more right-brained,
Mm-hmm.
more creative, right? Is it right-brained, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a dysregulation. We need to use both sides of the brain to function. We need to be balanced. We need to have masculine, feminine energy. We need to have yin yang, right? And when we're dysregulated in any of those arenas, we are unleveled, we're unbalanced, and we do things to the extreme, right? We might go into the studio and work nonstop for 12 hours without sleeping because our brain is functioning at the extreme in an imbalanced situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's mental illness, not prioritizing our sleep or eating, So when we're not taught how to take care of ourselves at a young age, we are repeating our parents' mental health disorders, patterns, emotional, you know, uh, our their emotional patterns,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they didn't know better. We didn't know better. We're just kids in an unsafe world. Like imagine, like we're born crying because it's scary as fuck, right? To just like get out of the womb and like have all these lights on you and you don't know what to do and you're like at the mercy of your parent to take care of you. So if that was not a safe environment, of course you're going to have mental illness.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too, because, people who grew up with alcoholic parents or in codependent situations, or, with parents with mental disorder, obviously there's a degree, because there's like high functioning people who have, I hate to use the word disorder, but like they're dealing with their own mental health issues, narcissism, or, just the fact that I think in certain generations, like my parents were so young when they had me, that they just weren't like mentally equipped to have so many kids before the age of 30. I mean, they had 6 kids before they were 30. And they had my sister when they were 19 and me when they were 23. And it's like, that's young. Like I remember what I was like in that age. And even though I was really responsible because I grew up in the situation that I did, that kind of forced me to take on a more parental role at a very young age and be very responsible when I should have just been out playing. It also kind of led to maybe, I'm going to say like internal, like a drive or something that probably might not even be there if I was about to say dysfunction, but I don't necessarily think it's dysfunction, but a drive that might not necessarily be there if I didn't feel like I had to do all these things to cope as a child. Right?
You're so right. You're so right, Tracy. And a lot of my clients that are the highest performers actually become coaches like you and me, because they're so driven by like the trauma response that like help them hit their success, that they want to help others so desperately to get out of that situation. They're just like, please don't do it the way I did. Let's do it better. Right. And, you know, overperforming, high achieving, capabilities can come from what is called the flight trauma response. So disassociating, like literally being in the clouds, having your mind racing at 100 miles per hour, is all a way to cope with not wanting to deal with the memories that come up when you slow down.
Oh my
When you slow
God.
down, you remember like, oh my God, my parents were bipolar. Holy shit. Like No wonder I feel, I get what's called muscle armoring, like when you get triggered and your muscles go up. When I hear someone screaming, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, so yeah, I really do think every human has hundreds of thousands of trauma responses firing up in their bodies every day. And better mental health is about regulating those trauma responses and remembering who the fuck you are, remembering your truth, remembering your spirit, that you're not your business, you're not the amount of money you have in the bank account, you're not your drive, you're not your results, you're not whether or not you're not your wins or your losses.
Also, you're not your art.
Exactly.
It's just something that you made.
This thing I just made, it could burn in a fire and I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's not
right?
you. I think that's a really important distinction, because my boyfriend Jason does mindset work for our community, and we've been doing work together as a couple and individually to heal our own trauma so that we can show up better in our relationship and in our career and stuff like that. And one of the distinctions, that because every month he's on a call, he's like coaching people through these, through their things that seem so real. And he's like, you have to remember, like, this is just something you made. This is not you. And so if someone, and I think, especially for beginners, I think once you get more experienced in your art and you start making money and you understand that, like, oh, okay, some people are just going to say no, like, it's not really like a reflection on who you are, your talent. But when you find the right people and they say yes, like, you just need to kind of lean into more people like that. But I know from the beginning, like, that fear of rejection or fear of not being worthy is like a real thing for people when they're first trying to sell things and it's not going how they want it. And so I think even just the belief of that, even if it's not really a truth, can sometimes prevent people from moving forward, right?
And that's a freeze trauma response when they cannot move forward.
Yeah.
Because moving forward and actually getting paid for your art, your body might see that as the threat, even though your brain knows it's good for you, right? It might see it as a threat because you're afraid of mismanaging your money, losing the money, because you're so attached, your ego is so attached to that money.
Yep.
So we see money as trauma, like as a threat, and we're trying to protect ourselves from what's threatening. Basically, what is threatening is what is considered the unknown. So our brain treats money and other things as if it's the tiger in the room. So we came from ancestors that were in tribes trying to protect themselves from tigers and bears. Oh my, right?
Yeah.
But we're not in tribes anymore. There are no tigers and bears. Oh my. But our brains are still functioning in that way as if there's a tiger in the room. So I told one of my clients the other day in my mental wealth course and challenge, I told her, next time you see the tiger in the room, turn it into the tiger from the cereal box and pretend like he's saying,
Tony?
yeah, Tony the tiger, you're great.
That reminds me, my grandfather used to do that all the time. I'm like, how are you doing, Grandpa? He's like, great. And he would like come on the table like that. I want to break my desk, but so funny.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's amazing. So I don't want to go too far into this, but just for people who are unaware, this interview is actually going to be backing up another interview that we're talking about trauma and psychedelics. So I want to just clarify, like, what do you mean by trauma, and like, what does that mean? Because it could be a wide range of things, right?
So trauma is an injury. Simply put, it's an injury. And when it's so bad that it causes emotional distress, that's where the trauma response kicks in. The trauma actually like is embedded into our bodies and our brains. So for example, someone might say that they're a war veteran and they went to war and that was traumatic, right? They come back with PTSD. Someone else can say that they were in school and their parents or their mom or dad didn't pick them up on time and they were left alone for hours. That could be trauma as well.
That's happened to a
Right.
lot of people I know, by the way. just
Yeah.
like by accident.
Yeah, right. And God bless those parents who were doing the best that they could with the tools and knowledge at the time, right? Um, so trauma is being thrown out there a lot nowadays, and research is showing that, someone who went to war versus someone who wasn't picked up on time from school can literally have the same kind of effects on the brain.
Yeah.
As
No, yeah.
crazy as that sounds.
Well, I mean, there obviously are like levels, like we don't necessarily want a group like, my mom screaming at me like because I didn't do the dishes or something as the same kind of trauma. Like that can be really jarring and can create a trauma response as someone who was like sexually abused. I mean, there's degrees, I think, for sure. But sometimes the body, like you're talking about fight or flight, when you're talking about the tiger, might not know the difference.
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
You're right. There's different degrees of trauma, and they all need to be appropriately looked at. But the body, like, okay, so the body of someone being raped and the body of someone being yelled at for not doing the dishes, they can actually be having the same kind of chemical reactions when that trauma happened. So for example, if you were yelled at for not doing the dishes and you do muscle armoring and you freeze and you're like, and then you have a lot of racing thoughts and you're just like, I think I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I mean, it could literally feel like you're gonna die, right? Especially if the parent was that abusive. The same as being raped. Like, and I know this from experience because I've been in both situations, and I can look back and see like, oh wow, like my body was actually producing the same kind of responses and chemical reactions in both situations, even though one is like much more deadlier than the other. Makes sense?
Yeah, totally. And so I think that distinction is important because I don't want, people who were like had severe abuse or sexual trauma to be like, that's not the same. Like it's just it's about the reaction from your body and what your cells remember. Cause like this is all going down to this like very granular cellular level that like filters into your psyche and your emotional response. And so I remember like, this is a really interesting story. And when I was a teenager, I was taking French. I only took it for one semester and then moved to Spanish, which is another sidebar, but we used to traumatize our teacher and drop like books really quickly on the ground because he would jump up like crazy because he had shell shock from being in the Vietnam War. And we thought it was funny, but like, how horrible is that? Like this guy has been, I didn't do it, but like, the boys did it in class. And I'm saying we, because like we all laughed and I feel bad, like understanding like, oh my gosh, that's a real thing. But I think the point being here is that probably every single person listening to this podcast has experienced some sort of trauma in their life. It's just the degree of the trauma and how you've healed the trauma that matters. And so that kind of leads me into the next segue. Like, what are some of the tools or steps or questions we can ask ourselves to kind of move beyond this to get into a place that's more where we can use our traumatic experiences more as fuel or integrate them or get to a place where we can like be a little bit more productive?
Wonderful question. Ooh, let me think for a second. So let's start with safety. When we have trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which I talk about and teach in my mental wealth network program, when those things kick in, our bodies don't feel safe. So the first thing we need to do is know what safety is and where it comes from. Safety comes from certainty. I just learned this week since hiring Mo Hassan, who is a very well-known business coach and world's best corporate trainer who coached Justice Ginsburg and the CEO of Verizon and things like that. So if you need a new coach, you're on my level. So we graduate, right, with coaches, right? Like there's levels to this game, right? So I've been working with him and he's helping me develop the Mental Wealth Network, which I shared with you in the past, which is a program that's going to teach creators how to have more mental wealth and how to prioritize their mental health. So the first thing I'm going to teach in that program is how to feel safe. And how to feel safe is to be completely certain, right? You can be in a really unsafe situation and remember certainty in the moment. Your brain will like literally do it to figure out like how you're going to get out of that unsafe situation. Let's say you're being robbed, right? Like you go into fight, flight, one of the trauma responses to get out, right? You need to freeze, you need to think, and then you need to look around the room, and then you need to escape, right? So safety is first, and safety comes from certainty, knowing where the door is to exit, and knowing where the robber's penis is, so you can just like hit him in the nuts, right? Before he, you know what I mean? So certainty is safety. If you're not certain, you're not safe. I repeat, if you're not certain, you are not safe. So if you don't have a business plan, you're not safe. No wonder creatives are stressing out because they don't have a freaking business plan.
Yeah, that's such a good comment or topic to talk about, because one of the core foundational aspects that we do in our momentum program with our designers is like every quarter we're doing strategic planning. We call it a success vision plan, but it's about envisioning what you want to create, really dialing in the details of what needs to happen, and then using that as a clear path forward instead of just being like, oh, what do I show up and do today?
Exactly. So you're actually helping them heal traumas
Mm-hmm.
without even like consciously saying it to them, right? This is why we're such great life and business coaches, because business planning takes life coaching. So my approach to coaching is 80% life coaching, 20% business strategy and consultation, because everyone can look up on Google what a business plan is.
Yeah.
My four simple questions for my client's business plan is: what are you selling? Who are you selling it to? Why are you selling it? And how are you selling it to your ideal client? That's it. When you know those things,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to wake up feeling unsafe and putting out fires in your business.
Yeah.
Like, I'm safe because not because I'm going to get $144,000, but because I have a plan for the next 60 days on how to secure $144,000, and I'm very certain that I'm going to get it. No ifs and no buts.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't quite hit it, it's okay, because I created the game and I'm not my wins or losses.
Mm-hmm.
I win because I created the game. Okay. So that's the first step to healing your mental health, is going back to being certain about your plan and your goals, and working backwards from your goals. Second thing is to be here now at every moment during your day.
Mm-hmm.
That's source, that's God, that's presence, that's spirit. Okay. So if you don't know how to connect, I think it's kind of like bullshit advice when people are like, just breathe and meditate. Like there's a whole strategy to that, and traumatized people actually have a hard time learning how to meditate. That takes time. So one thing to do is to just do the 5 senses check-in if you can't meditate. Because for some people who experienced a lot of trauma and didn't actually get a lot of oxygen to the brain growing up, when they breathe, oxygen to the brain can be traumatizing because it's new to the brain.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So instead of, like, I don't think as coaches, it's right of us to just say like, just breathe. Like that's kind of like bypassing like spirit, like just connect to God, just breathe. No, you got to give your clients tools. So one way that they can gain safety to then breathe is to do the 5 senses check-in. That's, ask yourself, what do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you touch? What do you hear? That's going to help your heart rate go down.
That's
and then you're
interesting.
going to be present.
It's an interesting way to reconnect. I've done this exercise a lot in writing retreats. Like my friend Laura Belgray, I went a couple of times to her writing retreat in Italy, and we would do that exercise like every single time. And we would start the day with it, like 20 minutes, like, what'd you see yesterday? What'd you hear? What'd you feel? What'd you touch? Like, what was the experience? Like the whole thing. And then it's fun because it gives you tools even beyond like just being present. It gives you tools like for copy and writing and all these other things too.
Oh my God, that's a great coach. Can you refer me to her? Because I want
Oh,
to
Laura
write in
Belgrade.
Italy.
Yeah, she's not a coach. She's a writer and she sells courses. She used to do copywriting for people. Now she just teaches people how to write, but she's amazing.
Oh, cool.
On my podcast. Her name is Laura Belgrade. She's a badass. So check her out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now once you do that, let's say you're going through the steps right now, right? I want to coach you site, because the only way that I know what to do next is to do it with someone so that I can guide them, because there's no like set of rules for everyone. It's you have to really do it with yourself. So Tracy, I want you to remember that safety comes from certainty. So are you certain right now?
I am in this moment. Yes.
Good, because you're here now. Now I want you to do the 5 senses check-in.
Mm-hmm. I don't smell anything, maybe like the mustiness in the room. What do I see? I'm looking at you and the beautiful blue sky outside the window here. What do I hear? The air conditioning running in the background. What do I taste? My smoothie from earlier mixed with my toothpaste. And what do I touch? I'm feeling my jeans that I'm wearing.
Great. So now that you know that you're certain and that you're present and you did the 5 senses check-in, how do you feel right now?
I feel excited. Yeah, clear
and excited. Is that what you need to continue moving forward through this podcast interview?
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, clarity is always good, right? And staying present for interviews.
Mm-hmm. So you're winning right now. You're accomplishing your goal.
I'm totally winning.
Yeah. So you're good. I don't think I need to give you any more tools for now. we already just like improved your mental health right now by just being aware of these things. That's it. There's more that I mean, there's like hundreds of tools in my toolbox, but it really depends on the client's goals. So those 2 tips are really great beginner's strategy to just get you here and now.
Awesome. Amazing. So where can everyone find you?
You can find me on IG at Michelle I. Gomez. And you can visit www.mentalwealth.network, which is my newest program that I'm launching in the next 60 days.
Okay, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it's a membership for creators who want to prioritize their mental health in order to have the life, love, and business that they deserve.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know this was like a super interesting conversation for me and also an important one. So thank you.
Thank you. And, I appreciate you having me on here. I just want to say that this is abundance right here, like 2 coaches in the same industry with like the similar kind of client archetype and target, just like sharing our businesses together and not being competitive. Like this is so awesome. So I want to thank you, and I would love to continue our conversations and keep collaborating. So let me know if you ever need me to come into your programs, and I would love to invite you into my programs at Mental Wealth.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I definitely will follow up on that.
Yes.
Awesome. Yay.
All right, Tracy. Yay.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. Of course, in the description down below and in the show notes, we're going to have a bunch of links to all the resources that Michelle spoke about. And obviously, if you are struggling with any severe mental illness or unhealed trauma and you need professional support, make sure that you seek out a professional to help you and get the support that you need. I think that that's really important. Don't use this podcast as a substitute for that. And if you're interested in learning more about how we can support you in your business and help you continue growing in 2022 and beyond, or whenever you're listening to this show, I'd love to invite you to apply for a free strategy audit over here at Flourish and Thrive Academy. You can head on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/strategy. So I'd love to invite you to apply for a free strategy audit. On that audit, we're going to take a look at your 3-year vision and some of the big goals that you have for your business. Take a look at what's happening in your business right now and identify any roadblocks or opportunities, and you'll walk away with a clear path forward. And if it makes sense, we'll share with you how we can support you in the programs we have over here at Flourish and Thrive. Head on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/strategy and apply for your strategy audit today. All right, this is Tracy Matthews signing off till next time. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share with me in the comments below one of your biggest takeaways. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.